All right, so today's Tech Talk session, we are going to get together now and take a look at classroom data, meaning the data that you get from Google Classroom. Many probably didn't even realize you can export that stuff out, and it has changed a little bit over the years. So we're going to pull some of that data and just look at some ways to use Sheets and add some filtering, some formatting, and just sort of get a look at what information is there, because you don't really have any of that option to break anything down when you're looking at it in Google Classroom. So let's start with Google Classroom. When I go to my classroom page, so classroom.google.com, which of course I get to just by hitting that cluster of dots and choosing classroom, um, I've got a few classrooms in here. Now, mine are test classrooms, of course, without real kids in them, so I don't have a lot of information in there, but I'll go ahead and just show you what you would do if you needed to pull any of this stuff, and then I'll jump to some sample data. So in my classroom, I can go up to grades. Sometimes it'll say marks, depending on how recently you created your classroom. This is slightly older, so I don't know if marks is the newer or older language, but regardless. What'll happen here is you'll jump in and you'll see the marks for every assignment and quiz and whatnot that you have in your classroom. If you've got multiple classrooms for different subjects, you're going to have to do this a few times to get all the information. But the idea here is that some of these are marked, well, mine are all marked. That one, yeah, I marked everything, so there's marks for everything, except maybe this very first one here. But if I want to actually export them, I can't do it on this page, which is interesting. If I hit the, say, settings button up there, there's nothing about marks here. So I don't really have any export choices right here, which might lead you to think there's nothing else you can do. But here's what you do. Click any one of these assignments. It doesn't matter which one. I'll pick, even that first one I said has no marks. Doesn't matter. I'm going to click it anyway. I'm going to see the information that was being submitted for that particular assignment. I could even come over here and give it a mark if I wanted to. So let me see. Elena's going to get 99 out of 100, and Tech Services gets 89 out of 100. And I could even return that stuff to the kids if I wanted to. Why not? Done, just to get it out of the way. Okay, point being, when I'm on an individual assignment and I'm looking at the work that individual students have provided me, that's where I can come over to the corner here and I can click that little gear that I see up in the top corner. And this time it doesn't take me to the settings for my entire Google Classroom. This is specific to this assignment, sort of. I'll show you what I mean. Here, it now says copy all grades to Google Sheets, but it's not talking about all of these grades. It's actually talking about, and if I go click back, all of these grades. It's going to get me absolutely everything. So it doesn't matter which assignment I pick. I'll grab another one, mapping project. Same little gear, same copy all grades to Google Sheets. That is the part that I said it was new. If you looked at this feature in the past, you looked at how to maybe pull some marks out of Classroom. When they first added this button and an option to export things at all, the only choice they gave you was to download these grades, and you would pull them out of Classroom, pull them off the web, basically, pull them to your machine, and you could open them up in, say, Excel, or you could then take that CSV and upload that back into Google Sheets. It's just extra steps. So thankfully they have fixed all that with copy grades to Google Sheets. So I'm going to click that now, and it takes a second, but what it spits up for me here is a simple little spreadsheet with all of my assignment headers across the top, all of my students down the left side. It gives me a average column right here, so I get an average for each student, and then of course an average row across the top showing me the averages for each assignment. As I said, there's not a ton of data here, so I'm actually going to jump to a sample version that I have. So when you pull yours out, it's going to look probably a little bit more like this. And in this example, there's a whole lot of different assignments here that were put out as, something to work on, but weren't necessarily being marked for class. So unfortunately, what I end up with is a whole lot of blanks here. Now let me just collapse that for a second. I'm going to try and make this as big as I can because spreadsheets are rough when we're trying to show them on video or on meetings like this. All right, that's a little better. And I'll move my head around when I need to get myself out of the way if necessary. So what we get up here is all of these column assignment headers, really. column headers. So it's giving me the name of each of these different assignments. And as I scroll across, there's some marks there, more there. So I do have marks in here to work with. And that's really what I want to focus on. So the first thing I'm going to show you actually is a interesting little filter formula. And it's kind of taking filtering and turning it vertically, like shifting it. And what I mean by that is typically if I had some data, let me grab some names, copy. I'm going to go to a new sheet for a second, just paste those in, and I'm just going to hammer out a couple of marks. So whatever. Why do I have an if error? Oh, I must have copied a formula with it there. Delete. Okay. Whatever. Any kind of marks at all. And I'm even going to just drag those across. Z. Meaning I'm going to highlight them, grab the little corner here, and just drag over. It's just going to copy them. Because I don't care right now. What I want to show you is simply that if I've got that kind of information, when I want to filter something, there's kind of essentially two ways I can do that. Let me go ahead and grab all of these guys and drag them down so I can make some headers. That'll be whatever, test one. And I'm going to drag that across. That'll increment these to test 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a neat little trick. But what I want to do is look at this data and come up to my filter button that I see over in the very top here. So if I click create a filter, it immediately recognizes, oh, here's a bunch of data that's all together and gives me these cute little arrows here. So I can now filter this and say, oh, okay, I only want to see the marks that are 76%. And in that column, it gives me just the 76s and filters out everything else. So that's filtering vertically that way. It's squishing my table down to just a couple of entries. And that's super handy. I use it all the time. Being able to filter data like that is great. The other thing you can do, and if I just click up here to turn that filter off, maybe I need to not mess with the data where it is. I need to kind of pull data somewhere else. I need to filter it in a slightly different way. Well, there's a function that you can use for filtering. Just like sum and average and max and min and other simple formulas you might use, there's a slightly more complicated one we're going to mess with called filter. So I hit equals, filter, open that bracket, and what we see there, if I pop this open, super helpful little panel here. First it wants to know the range, so the group of cells that we're going to be filtering. And then the conditions that we want to filter on. So where I clicked up here and I said, show me just the 76s, that's the condition, equal 76. Well, in this case, I'm going to say, all right, here's the range I want you to filter. And it conveniently types that right into the cell for me, comma. What's the condition? Well, let me do the exact same thing. I want to see any time that the values in column D here, there we go, D equal 76. Close that bracket, hit enter. See where I messed it up. Expected a row count of 6. Actually got a row count of 1,000. Yeah, it's because I clicked D and the whole thing went huge. So let's just click into here for a second. Where that's 1 to 6, I'm going to say anytime that D1 to D6. There we go. So it's the same criteria and same range. That'll make it much happier. Hit enter. No matches found. Oh, of course, because these are in percentages. So let me just get rid of that for half a second. I don't want to mess around with it right now. For our purposes, it's not worth me fighting with it. I'm simply going to take all of you and say format as a number. And it's all 0.76. So there you go. So that's of course why. I'll bet I can even undo that. If I go back like that, I could probably even come back into my formula and say equals 0.76. Is that going to work? Nope, same. I went back too far. Too many undos. 1 and 6 at 0.76. Perfect. It worked exactly. So yeah, it doesn't take the 76 when it's a percentage because the real number, of course, is not actually 76. It's actually 0.76. So by saying, hey, I want you to just give me the column D whenever it's a 76, it gave me the exact same kind of filter results that I got when I came up here and I turned on my filters and I said, hey, give me the 76s. So by doing it with a function like this, by using a formula to write that all out, it's going to allow you to pull data from one place to another without actually messing with your original data. And in fact, you can then take that and like feed it into other things as well. But the thing that's interesting here that we're going to do, this, as I said, is all vertically filtering stuff. You can actually use the function, not the button at the top, but the function to filter things horizontally instead of vertically. So here's what we're going to do. And I'll show you this as clear and cleanly as I possibly can. Let me zoom out a bit here. Okay. Oh, and I was messing with it already here. Let me delete that for a second. Okay. So what I want to be able to do is take all of that data and get rid of all these blank columns. So truthfully, of course, if you want to spend the time and you're working with it on your own and what we're about to do is weird and confusing, that's fine. You could even do this bit I'm about to show you and skip everything else. And that's simply delete columns. So I could click on E and drag myself across all of these blank columns where there was no marks and then just right click and delete. That's the sort of low tech, easy, non-spreadsheet nerd kind of way to do it. Just delete those columns and get rid of them. And eventually you're going to be left with just names and your data. And that would work. That's really what we're after anyway. But I want to give you the fancy way. So if I were to come up to down to the bottom here, I'm going to keep it on the same sheet just to keep it easy for a second, and then I'm going to move it. I'm going to say equals filter, open that bracket, and this time what I need to do is not, what's the right word? I'm going to do a range, but I'm not doing a range that is A2 to B2 kind of thing. It's not the same cell references because I don't want it to reference the columns. I'm just looking at rows now. So instead of filtering and reducing rows, I need to reduce columns. It's going to make a lot of sense when I show it to you here. So that says filter and it wants to know the range. Well, the range in this case is going to be A2 because I want the second row in there because I need these headers. So A2, go ahead and type that, A2. To not a cell over here, like say N29. I actually need all of it, all the way across, the entirety, all the way down to row 29. So instead of referencing a column, I'm only going to reference the row. So 29. And you can see as soon as I did that, I've got this box drawn all the way around it now. So I know it's grabbed absolutely everything all the way out to the end, however far that might be. Column AR in this case, but I don't care. I've just said that's the range that I want, all of that. Now I'm going to go comma, and the next piece is the condition. And I always love that these little tips highlight it for you. So the condition is going to be that I want it anytime that, let's say, anything in this row. I'm going to go with the average row. This gray row right here is row 5. I'm going to say anytime that that is greater than 0. That's what I want. If it's less than 0, meaning no marks at all, I don't want it. So to do that, I'm just going to say A5 colon 5, just that row. So it's only using this as its reference point for what it's going to filter. And I'm going to say anytime that that is greater than 0. Close my bracket, hit enter. And now I have a nice tight little table of data here. I've got my same column headers here. Let me wrap that text for a second. There you go. So I've got all my little assignment headers and titles and things. I've got my averages. That is? No, that's not the average. Open Classroom. What is that? 100. Oh, it's what it's out of. Huh. It's what the test was out of. Um, and then we've got our averages right there, and then all of our students and all of our data. So that's perfect. That's what I'm looking for. Now, the downside of the way I just did it, of course, is that I'm on the same sheet as my original data, and I kind of want to separate it. I want to make it nice and clean and keep it out of the way. So I'm going to show you how to write a function like that, but I'm going to do it over on the other sheet. So let me highlight this for a second. Copy. And go over to sheet 2. So we're messing around, and I'm just going to select everything and delete it. Turn off my functions, my filters here. Get rid of that too. All right, 150. Let's make this big for a second. So if I click into here and I just paste in that, it's looking for A2, the row 29, A5, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to work. Let me blow that up even more just to make sure you guys can see everything. There we go. The problem being that when you have cells on one sheet and you want to see them on another sheet, you need to not only say it's coming from A2 or B3 or whatever the cell might be, you also need to make sure that you actually reference the name of the sheet. So it's like, I mean, I often will reference, A1 and B2 like Battleship. Well, now it's like, okay, I not only need to specify the cell, the grid coordinate, but I also need to specify which sheet, so which table, which, I don't know, be ridiculous, which Battleship game around the table am I actually shooting at? Maybe we're playing, I don't know, three-person Battleship, and I need to say, I'm firing at Chris's A2, and I'm going to fire at Kelly's B3. That's essentially what we're doing with a spreadsheet. What a weird example I just came up with. Um, so what we do here with the filter option is I need to throw in the sheet name. And I'm going to show you how to do that with just clicking on it. I'm going to rewrite this formula. So let me delete that. And I'm going to say equals filter, open the bracket. And this time what I do, instead of just clicking around and having it type in that cell number, I'm going to come down to sheet, in this case sheet 0, apparently I named it. And I can still see filter flashing up on the top there. I'm still writing the function. And what I want to do is say from A2, so I'm going to click right here at 2, and when I click on the row 2, you'll see it actually writes in 2, 2. Well, I know I need it to be A2, so I'm going to type the A2 all the way down, and I can scroll again to see where it finishes. There it is, 29. And I can see there's my orange box. So I know that it's grabbing all of the data that I wanted to grab. Perfect. I'm going to go comma. Now, again, I still need to be on this sheet, so that's perfect. I'm not going back to the other one yet. It's going to be sheet 0, and you can see that up at the top here, on A5, which is my class average column. So let me just go 5. But again, I want it to be A5. Let me try that. A5, there we go. Greater than 0, same as before. Close that up, go. Beautiful. So let me just double click into there so this is nice and big on screen for you and you can get a really clear look at it. So you can see how before it just said A2 to 29. Now it's sheet 0 with an exclamation mark, and that is how you write sheet names. Anytime you need to reference different sheet names. So if I was doing, I don't know, some kind of business accounting type stuff, and I had a bunch of totals, let's say, I don't know, common type example would be like expense sheet or something. And you've got your expense sheet and you've got your budget for one location, but I own 5 locations. So I've got the same sheet basically 5 times with different numbers on it. Same thing if we had a bunch of schools. Then on the last sheet or the first sheet in my whole big spreadsheet here, I want to tally all that stuff up. So I'm going to grab the total calculated expenses from sheet 1 plus the same cell probably in sheet 2 and then plus sheet 3 and then plus sheet 4, but referencing that cell across all of them. And then I can add up the total from all those multiple sheets onto one sheet. So always useful to be able to reference a sheet that you're not looking at. and pull that data over. All right, very long-winded way to go through all of that. Wasn't really expected to spend quite that much time on it. But now that we've got this stuff in there, we can get into the easier stuff, just some formatting and some cleaning up to sort of get a better look at what we've got in front of us. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that first row again and use the text wrapping tool that we have up top here and say I want everything in that row to wrap. So I can actually see these titles. If they're important to me, then that's going to be something I need. Right here, let's see, probably don't need that stuff. I could just delete it. And there's nothing in this row at all, so I could definitely delete that one. But what I really want to do here, in fact, yeah, I don't care about those. I'm going to highlight both of those rows and then right-click on the actual row number, and that's going to allow me to delete the row. Now, if you haven't done this very many times before, there's a few different options when you do right-click on rows. Delete is what I want. It will get rid of everything in there. If I clear the rows, all it's going to do is delete the numbers or the text, the content of those cells. It's not actually removing the rows itself. Hide rows is, well, the opposite of both. It's neither clearing out the data or deleting the rows. It's literally just collapsing them and hiding them. I'll show you that right now. If I do that, it looks like they're gone, but they're not. When you look at the side here, I go from row 1 to row 4 because they still are absolutely right there. And I can hit this little arrow that appears and they pop back out. So let me get rid of them with a delete. There. Oh, what was that? You flickered at me. Oh, huh, of course. So this is, okay. This is the other part that's important. I can't touch any of this. It's all coming from one function that's pulled all this information over. And it doesn't matter if I click here and I hit delete, because it's just going to come back. I can highlight all of that stuff and say delete. It doesn't matter because it's all being fed from that one function. So I can't edit this stuff. I can't change numbers. I can't make any of those adjustments. So first thing I'm going to do is fix that. Whenever you've got information like this, I'm going to just highlight. Let's see, I'm going to highlight the entire sheet, which means instead of clicking and dragging and trying to find like where's the top and where's the bottom, what's going on, instead, much, much simpler. There's a whole problem, and you're going to kick yourself if you've been watching things scroll left and right for years now. If you come up to the very top corner here, to the left of A and above row 1, into this little square of nothing, and you click one time, it selects absolutely everything on the entire sheet, which means I can now go ahead and copy the entire sheet. I could format the entire sheet. I could make it all bold. I could do whatever I want to it that way. What I'm going to do right now, though, is copy the information. Done. Now I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to use not paste, but paste special. Because if I just paste it, watch me go, boom, pastes it, but you'll notice in the first cell, it's still my formula. That's really all that's here. So if I come down there, select a bunch of things, and try and delete them, still not going to work. Okay, so select everything, right-click and copy. And this time I need to go to paste special because there's a bunch of ways to paste. And that's true in here, in Docs, in Word, in Excel, in PowerPoint, in Slides. There's always a few ways to paste things. It's not just simple copy paste. Here, I actually want to paste the values only. I don't want formulas. I don't need formatting. I don't need anything else. I just want the values that I see in front of me that I'm copying. Now paste them back onto the sheet. So paste. Now, did a couple of things. Now there's no function here, so that's good. Now these two rows aren't being fed by a function, so I'm happy to delete them. But you'll also notice that, hey, my average just went wonky because it completely blew away all the formatting too. It didn't carry over any of my formatting. So I have to click on D now and say, you know what, you are a percentage. There we go. And I probably don't need that many decimals. Let's go there. Same thing for my class average row. In fact, I'll show you another button here. Instead of highlighting it like that, what I can do is use this one, the Format Painter. I'll throw that in because often I've mentioned it in lots of workshops and people have never heard of it. It's like copy and paste, but it's copy and paste for formatting. It's kind of the opposite of exactly what I just did, where I only pasted the value. Here what I'm going to do is click on that cell because that's the one that's formatted the way I like it. Hit the format painter one time, and then anywhere I click next, it's going to apply that format to that cell. So if I click on this one, it's going to apply that same format to that cell. But I don't want to have to do that over and over and over across this whole thing. This could be many, many columns potentially. So instead, I click on the one that I like. I click Format Painter, and I'm going to click on row 2 and format the entire thing all in one shot. That's a lot of percentages. I didn't look very closely at the numbers, but that's how you can apply formatting, assuming the numbers are appropriate for it. But I don't care right now. I'm not going to worry about any of that actually. In fact, just to make it really easy, I'm going to blow that row away. Okay. If you needed to hide things like emails and such, you could certainly. I'm just going to squish that down. But let's get into a little bit of color coding and simple fun stuff. So first thing I can do here is go ahead and go up to my Format menu and add alternating rows. So alternating rows are colored rows or banded rows. And I can go with, I don't know, I'll go with the blue. Maybe the green. Go with the green. It shows you right here what my header color will be like and then what the two alternating colors will be like. So you can make changes there too. If you decided, no, I like my headers to be like painfully yellow, you could do that. Or I like this green better. Whatever. Sure. Now it looks wonky. All right, I'm going to leave it like that. And say done. Finished. So banded rows just make reading data a whole lot cleaner and easier on your eyes. Especially if you're going to print this out, instead of using like a ruler or your finger on screen or something, this just makes looking at a name on the left and scanning all the way across to find the right numbers a whole lot easier on your eyes. So banded rows right away, or alternate, what they call it, alternating colors is what they're calling that now. Cool. All right, next thing. I want to do a little bit of conditional formatting on this stuff because I don't want to have to hunt for high numbers and low numbers and resort things constantly. I just want to format it and color code it in a way that I can see what's going on. So I'm going to highlight all of these numbers because I'm not going to do it on the average or any of these other places. It's just the data that I want to do this to. We come up to Format, and instead of the alternating colors, this time I'm going with conditional formatting. Click that. And what we've got going on here is two options, basically at the very top. I have single color formatting, so I can do things like, I don't know, make something red if it is 90% or higher or something along those lines, or highlight it in whatever way I want. And I'll do that in a moment. But what I want to show you first is color scale. So color scale shows this little preview here, saying from the lowest number will be really dark green and the highest number will be a white. I'm going to click on that and instead go with a scale, red to green. So your lowest numbers are going to be red, your highest numbers are going to be green. But beyond that, I can look at right below it and take a look at these sort of minimum points, the midpoint, and the maximum point. So where do we want to color code these things? I'm going to say, you know what, I'd rather highlight the kids that are doing well. So I'm going to bump that up to 75. And that way it gives me, like 50 is not my midpoint really. I don't want that to be my midpoint. And so I'm going to leave that just the way it is. If I wanted to, I could actually make the midpoint colorful. I could make that yellow or something, and it would really taint. You saw that just went orange, and this went a weird, pukey kind of green as soon as I added the yellow. But let's leave it at white for now. That's fine. And say done. Awesome. Now I can tell pretty quickly, of course, that this one was not out of 100. Everything else was, but that was not. So it's a bit of an anomaly that way in the way my data is working, but that's okay. It made it stand out instantly, which is kind of the point of the formatting. but I wanted to make another rule here. So I'm going to add another rule. Let me highlight all this stuff again. Add a rule. And this time I want to say, you know what? Let's highlight something. I am going to go with that standout painfully yellow color. And I want it to do it anytime. Look at these options too. I should pause for a second. Format the cells if, and you've got a drop-down list. So I can do whatever kind of colored formatting on the background, or I can change the font style. I can make it bold. I can make it a different type of text. I can do all kinds of different things to that based on these rules. So things like, is the cell empty or is it not? Does it have text or not? Is it a date? Is it a date after or before certain values? Or is it greater than or less than or equal to all these other sort of options, these different number values? And that's what I'm going for. These are all pretty easy to sort of work out and understand and say out loud to yourself, and you'll figure out what they're doing. The wonky one is custom formulas. I'm going to leave that alone for today. It's not crazy difficult, but it is a bit strange and abstract. I often look at samples to figure out, like, okay, wait, how do I write this? I know what I want, but how do I write it the way that actually works? So I'm not going to delve into that just yet. But let's say anything less than or equal to 50. Because I do want to find out who's like really failing these assignments. And say, done. And nothing happened. Do we have any under 50s? I'm sure we do. There's some really hard reds and stuff in here, so those would show up under 50 really quickly. But these aren't working. And there's a reason. Things are get layered on top of each other. So what you want is when you've got one rule and then you add another rule on top of it, it's the rule on top that you're going to see. And if that rule happens to be all encompassing, it's going to override whatever the first rule was that you wrote. So if your other rule, in this case the yellow, is very specific, it's not trying to color code every single cell, it's only looking for really specific ones, you need to take that rule and put it on top, because you'll be able to see through it to the rest of those rules. Which means, so for a complicated way to say, put your mouse right here, click and drag it up. That's it. You just got to get it on top. So anytime you're doing conditional formatting and things aren't working out the way you want them to, go ahead and grab that and just change the order and see if that's what was going on. Now in this case, it's not really highlighting enough for me. I kind of like to see things a bit better than that. So I'll bump up my criteria here. I'm kind of ignoring this yellow column because duh, if anything, if the whole thing was out of 10, or in this case I'm going to say probably out of 5, yeah, they're definitely going to be below 50. So let me click on that. How about 60? Even below 60. Now we're starting to see some stuff light up. I'll leave it at that for now. There we go. So that is very quickly highlighting what's going on. In this case, I might say, you know what, that wasn't relevant to what I'm talking about. Let's just hide it. Don't have to delete it. I'll just hide it for now. And I can look at that. Awesome. So how else might we use some of this stuff? Well, I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can take this and create some little charts based on a little drop-down list. So a dynamic chart. If you say, I want to see a chart to see how this particular student is doing on his various assignments, we can do that. So I'm going to come over to the side here for a second and show you first, how do I get a filter that shows me just the numbers for one student? Well, I'm going to say equals filter, open that bracket, and the range, of course, is going to be all these numbers. Let me just grab all that stuff, including their names. Well, let me think, what do I want to base this on? I might use the email address because, well, no, for you guys it'll be student number, so let me go ahead and leave names in there. Comma. My condition in this case, I want to, oh, I sort of went backwards here. I'm going to be doing it based on the kids' names. So let me just get rid of this for a second. Click on Benjamin and show you where we're heading with this one. So I'm going to type Benjamin's name right there for a second. Now right next to it, this is where I'll write filter, open, get all this data, perfect. And then, I'll keep these tips open so you can see them the whole time. The condition is going to be that column A matches or is equal to whatever name I have over on my sheet here, which right now is Benjamin. So my formula ends up saying if A, column A, is equal to that cell, so the name that I see right there. Closed and done. Oh, I got my um, rows and columns mixed up for a second here. Well, I guess that's not rows and columns exactly, but the mismatch again. So it tells you right here, it expected 24 rows and it got 967 because I wrote that by just saying A. So you know what? Let's say A2 to A25. We'll make it match. So it's the same number of rows, and that won't be mad at me. There we go. So do I need all of that stuff? Probably not. Let's say I don't need A, B, C, or D. So I'm going to double click my formula and say if the data starts on column E, I really only need to see column E to M25. But I'm still going to do my filtering based on the name. So do that and hit enter. Perfect. Now I've got just the values for Ben. I'm going to make this a little tighter just so you can see. Double click. There we go. Oh, there's nothing in there, so you can't really resize that, but that's okay. There, much tighter. So I, of course, am not going to be typing in students' names here over and over again. That's crazy talk. So here's what we're going to do. Introduce you to another option here we have called data validation. So data validation happens on the data menu here, right here. And what validating data basically means is saying you can only put certain things in this cell. They have to meet a certain rule. Maybe that rule is as simple as it has to be a number. So you can't type text into a particular cell. If what I'm looking for is an age, I don't want you to write, like type out 22. So that data validation is going to allow you to control what goes in a cell. But one of the really cool things that it lets you do is create drop-down lists. So I'm going to hit that. And there's a new way to do this too, actually, I should show you. But let me just show you how this works first, because data validation is useful for a lot of different things, not just drop-down lists. I'm going to hit add a rule. And immediately it says, okay, drop down. This is what it thinks I want to do right away, because this is a very common option. It's got the cell listed right here, so it knows where it's going to do this validation. And I want my drop down not to be based on what I type right here, because that means typing a bunch. Instead, I'm going to go drop down from a range. And when I said that data validation does way more than just drop downs, it's all this other stuff. You can enforce all kinds of different rules about what's allowed in a cell and what's not. It can only be dates, or it could only be values, or it could only be text or emails even. But point today is drop down from a range. So I click that, and of course it needs to know what range. Where are we getting this information from? Well, it's going to be column A here. So I'm going to go click, click, and I could actually just type A, like that. The fact that it's the different rows from what we were doing before doesn't mean anything. And the beautiful part about the validation stuff is it's not going to include any of those empty rows. So when I click OK, it grabbed all the values that it actually saw. If there was blank rows in there, it completely skips them, ignores them, doesn't care. Say done, and we're in good shape. So now, since this function, let me just double click and make it bigger. I'll make this stupidly big for you guys. There we go. Now this function is looking specifically at O2. Whatever value it finds there, it's going to match it with the name. Hit enter, which means I can squish you for a second, make you a bit bigger. Perfect. Click my drop down and I can pick Charles. and my numbers change. Jubilee, or jubilation technically. Jennifer, Reed. You get the idea. I can pick any of these, all these numbers change. Great, you're saying, what's the point? Well, the point here is that I can highlight these guys, come up to my create a cell, insert a chart button, hit that guy, and maybe zoom out a little so you can see what's going on. Squishy squish, there we go. Okay, so I now have a chart. I'm not a big fan of the line chart in this case though. Let's go with bars. Perfect, okay. So I've got a bar chart here, and this is going to show me basically the marks. I wonder if I can get the x-axis to be up here, right there. By telling it, there we go, telling it to use the E1 to M1 as the x-axis, just labeled all of these bars so you know exactly which assignment it was that they got the different marks on. And from there, I can close this down. And it means I can just adjust things here. Let me move this over so you can see what's happening. There we go. Now, this chart is being driven by whatever it sees in these cells, right? Because I had selected these and then hit my chart button right there in order to generate this, which means as soon as I change the name to Charles, the chart changes, or Benjamin, and the chart changes. The bit, of course, that's not changing, unfortunately, is the name here. It grabbed the name based on what it saw next to the data. So I can double click into there, and instead I'll just have to call it like, I don't know, class marks. I'll be really creative today. There. Because that part you can't do dynamically. I've looked, believe me, I've tried to make that be based on a cell, and it won't let you do it. Not yet, anyway. Maybe one day. But for right now, it just means that as I continue to change any of this stuff, those charts will just update themselves. And so again, maybe I was looking at all this stuff, and let me just zoom out a bunch to normal. I've got my chart, and I've got my names, and I've got all this data here, and I'm sitting down on parent-teacher night, and I'm going to talk to whatever, Jennifer Walters' parents. I'm going to take all this other student data and just hide it. Did I destroy something? Oh, it needs to see it. That's a pain. I'm shocked. All right, fine. Well, if I can't hide it, I'll move it over to here. Or if I really wanted to, we could do what we did here, where we started at the bottom and we looked at all this data and we pulled it over to sheet 2. You guys can't see my sheet tabs I'm clicking on at the bottom. I could have, instead of doing it over to the right here the way I did, if I really wanted to, I could do this validation and this function, and I could do it all over on like sheet 3, go to another tab. I could do it all there, and that way I stay on that tab and do it all over there instead of allowing, say, parents or whoever's sitting with me to see all of this information that's there. Right. There we go. So that's what's going on there. You're going to be able to go ahead and tailor and target each kid and get a nice view of exactly what's going on. Oops, Scott. What is Scott? So there's a good one. I can look at that and I can see, yep, there's some yellows in there and some other stuff that got completely missed. So whatever helps me visualize stuff, whether it's going to be charts like this where you can go through each kid and take a look at how they're doing, or if it's just color coding and using all of the conditional formatting to really highlight data, it's going to help you to see those numbers and kind of give them a bit more context and a bit more meaning instead of just a pile of numbers on a grid. And it's really hard to look at, especially when you're looking at things like Classroom, because again, when I was over here looking at any of the actual classroom work, I had another page up here for you guys. There we go. So when I look at it in Classroom, this is what it would actually look like once it pops open. There we go. So we've got all these different handed in and missing and all this other content in there that has nothing to do with the marks that I actually want to look at. So trying to get anything too useful out of that is going to be really, really hard. Whereas when we can just look at our numbers, let me go over to sample marks, there we go. It's going to give you the opportunity to look and visualize and see a bit more of what's going on with each kid in that class and how those grades are working out and who's struggling and who's actually really strong. Looks in this case like Robert Drake is our star student, and that just jumps right out at me based on those, dark green cells that are there. I didn't even look up the actual numbers. So definitely bumping up against our hour here, so I'll finish it up right there. I'll provide some of the sample stuff as well on Tech Talk so that you guys have access to that file and you can make a copy and start messing around. I'll just give you a clean sample, and then I'll probably retain some of the stuff that we did here in the lesson so that you have it as a reference to go back to. So you can create your own, or you can use it and base it on what you see in front of you. So that'll be it for today in terms of our look at the spreadsheet and the classroom data and just sort of working with that and breaking it down in a way that makes a bit more sense to you. And other than that, I will see you at the next Tech Talk.